People are angry.
The government, sadly, is asleep on this.
Not enough action is happening.
A lesson is not learnt until changes are made.
This was not something that wasn't predicted.
Emergency services leaders blasting the Morrison government, claiming it ignored warnings back in October that Australia was at high risk of catastrophic flooding, a claim the PM denies.
They must have been misinformed. No one was predicting a 1 in 500-year flood, I should stress, which is what has impacted in Lismore.
It's just the latest round in a weekend of finger-pointing, which saw the government putting responsibility on the states.
Declarations of emergency rely on requests being made by state governments. That's wholly appropriate.
The opposition saying that's irrelevant because the government has the power to send in the ADF whenever they want.
The reason they gave themselves that power was to avoid the argy-bargy we saw with the bushfires.
The SES accused of ignoring offers of help from the Defence Force.
I don't accept that we rejected the calls from the ADF. We were speaking to them, we were getting those helicopters pre-positioned.
And the New South Wales government claimed it waited 5 days for the ADF troops it requested, and only found out about the 2,000 available personnel through the media.
There will be a review, and no doubt there'll be learnings again, as there is in every crisis, but I think it's not helpful to actually have a blame game going on.
But to many experts, honing in on what went wrong and why is essential if we're to have any hopes of battling the many environmental disasters that lie ahead.
Former New South Wales Fire and Rescue Commissioner Greg Mullins heads up Emergency Leaders for Climate Action and joins us now. So, Greg, your focus here seems to be very much on the federal government as opposed to state governments. What is it that you're saying they realistically could have done to stop the devastation that we've seen this past week or so?
Look, we'll first of all implement all of the recommendations of the Royal Commission into National Natural Disaster Arrangements. 500 days. And out of 80 recommendations, about 14 have been, some of them may have been implemented, but only partially implemented. Now they go to things like managing charitable donations, managing refuse from flood areas, insurance. It goes into everything. And the national government's just wiped their hands of it.
Sure.
When the NRRA, the National Recovery and Resilience Authority, came into being under the Prime Minister's Department, they stopped even reporting on progress with the Royal Commission. So there was a lot that could have been done. The briefings were there, but nobody ramped up. And I know the state emergency services certainly did.
So, Greg, I understand your criticism there. A lot of the recommendations that you mentioned there are really for things to do with the aftermath, like insurance and the like. I'm just wondering, what are the concrete things that would have made this disaster less devastating for people in the past fortnight?
Well, look, you might recall that back before Black Summer, our group tried to warn the Prime Minister multiple times that a horror bushfire season was coming. We were ignored. But one of the issues we wrote to him about was activating the ADF. We said it was cumbersome, slow, and you'd get these bizarre conversations going on. We'd say, we need help. They'd say, well, what do you need? We'd say, well, we need this. Don't tell us what you need. Tell us the capability and we'll tell you whether you can do it. So it was backwards and forwards, and hearing that the state government learned via the media that there are actually 2,000 people available. I've been there. I know that happens. And it was supposed to have been fixed after Black Summer, but it just hasn't been. And this is the frustration. We've got so many people out there homeless, far more than during the bushfires. Now, are they going to be living in tents in 2 years like people on the south coast who were burnt out were? And I was fighting fires at Bateman's Bay on New Year's Eve. Lots of the people, I suppose we saved their lives, but they're now living in tents. And we can't afford for this fumbling by the federal government and the finger pointing every time something goes wrong.
But isn't this a state issue? I mean, the Prime Minister says the ADF can be deployed, yes, but in the first instance, this is a state issue when you have a flood. And I'm not sure what you would have happen. Would you have an SES unit on every corner waiting for the next natural disaster? You can't do that.
I can't see, but I think that sounds like Steve. Hi, Steve. Look, the Constitution says that emergency management is the responsibility of the states and territories. That's until they can't handle it, and it's a catastrophic disaster, and then there's mechanisms to bring in federal aid. But in practice, and when I was Commissioner for 14 years, we'd talk and we'd get ahead of the game. And it looks like it's almost management by media conference. national emergency that was declared, people are telling me a lot of people in agencies in Canberra had no idea until they saw the Prime Minister on the news.
But I get that. But I mean,
so
we're still in the middle of the emergency here. Sorry to interrupt. And I was speaking to a local who runs a big business up there today, and he said the locals in Lismore are getting sick and tired of people politicising their flood emergency, and that you should all shut up.
Look, I know they're in the anger stage, and I've spent, my entire working life, I've been responding to emergencies for 50 years, and I've lost a bit of bark over that and mental health impacts, but I'm really upset hearing what some of those people have gone through, and it must be horrific for them, and they don't need this. But I have to say, in defence of the emergency services, they were overwhelmed, just like we were during the Black Summer bushfires. And this is climate change in action. This is what happens with just 1.4 degrees increase in temperature. We have wild weather systems. The Bureau of Meteorology can't predict anymore because they're so wild. And we get dumps of rain. So no one would have predicted a 2 metre above historic high flood at Lismore, even the day before, but it did, and that overwhelmed the emergency services. So in that respect, it's not their fault, and we can't fall into this trap of like the 2009 Black Saturday fires. Let's sack the police commissioner and the fire chief. That achieves nothing when we're dealing with things that are going to overwhelm responses. And I went to New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, spoke to fire and emergency chiefs, and they said we were taken out by the storm. Our response capability was gone.
Yeah.
And every disaster, you have to rely on first responders.
Yeah, wasn't Katrina such a landmark in that way? Greg, thank you very much for speaking with us. No doubt we'll speak again.